Want to shop Walmart Black Friday deals first? Walmart Plus members get early access to our hottest deals. Join now and get 50% off a 1-year annual membership. Shop Black Friday deals first with Walmart Plus. See terms at walmartplus.com.
Money decisions don't have to be either or. With Bank of America, they can be yes and. Like yes to sunny vacations and rainy day funds. Can our digital tools and guidance help you create the future you want? Yes. And help you keep enjoying today, too. Do more with a bank that asks, what would you like the power to do? Explore our tips and more at bankofamerica.com/yes and.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Big Ten Football Talk Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Guggenheim, and today I have my good friend Sammy Jacobs of the Hoosier Huddle. We are talking Hoosiers, but before I let him talk, make sure to like, subscribe, follow wherever you get your podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. But without further ado, Sammy, how you doing?
We're doing awesome. We're 10-0. We're the main villains of the SEC right now, so bring it on.
Yeah, you know that you've made it when Paul Feinbaum is angry at you.
Yeah, let him be angry at me. I don't care. As Kirk Signetti would say, I don't care.
I don't care either. He's oh boy, ESPN doesn't know what to do with you guys. It's great. It's a wonderful feeling. I thought this was a great time to get you on. Obviously, even before 10-0 and 9-0, the season that Indiana has had has been remarkable. And obviously there's a lot of ways we can take this, but we talked about this off air. The main thing I want to do in this episode is really just give people around the Big Ten an idea of what things are like in Bloomington right now, experiencing what is maybe the greatest season in Indiana history. On the eve, or I guess it's the week eve. I don't know how to say it, but
it's game week.
Yeah,
it's game week.
Yeah, as maybe one of the biggest games for Indiana to, in a sense, prove itself. Top 5 matchup with number 2 Ohio State. It's going to be a top 5 matchup, which Ohio State under Ryan Day has struggled with. So the goal is really just to get the vibe of this team and this program from the lens of you guys. And Sammy, you've covered Indiana for a long time. So for you first, what's this ride been like for you?
It's been kind of, and I don't want to get sappy here, but it's been like emotional. We've been covering this team for 11 seasons. We've seen some really awful seasons. And we've also, me and my co-writer, TJ Inman, have been partners in this since 2014. And so we've seen some awful seasons. We saw some really good seasons. And then we saw the last 3 years, which totally kind of sucked the soul out of us and made it not fun. So to see our work kind of get recognized and find the fan base, and now you're getting kind of rewarded with this 10-0 season. Mm-hmm. It's all this hard work that we put in, that TJ's put in, that all my writers, and this goes back, we've had student writers for the last 8 or 9 years who've been with me: Alex Compton, Nate Comp, Lydia Knoll, and there's a lot of Riley Kahn and Juliet Gahan and Laura Lee Shallow. All these people put in so much work to help us get to where we are, and it's kind of man, I wish we were all together to see this, because this is what we talked about in our group chats and things like that. And we got a taste of it in 2019 and 2020, and those are really fun. But yeah, it's, it kind of, validates all the work you're putting into it. The vibe in Bloomington is unreal. I don't party much anymore, but yeah, this would blow any party out of the water. I don't know how to describe. It's just like, you had big noon kickoff, game day the next week, and then you had the spittoon game against Michigan State where there were probably 5,000 IU fans up at Michigan State, and then you come home to a raucous crowd against Michigan. It's been like a nonstop party for a month, maybe even more since the Nebraska game.
Yeah. Well, and it's two things I want to point out that you said. One, you talked about the Hoosier Huddle being, growing. I remember you messaged us in the group chat of the College Huddle. Like, you guys had advertisements at bars in Indiana, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like,
yeah, we have some advertisement up at local establishments in Bloomington, and we sponsored their breakfast club for the Michigan game, and we'll have T-shirts there for the Purdue game and stuff like that. But yeah, just going back to it, I remember being the only media person at IU games against Rutgers multiple times, and now it's you can't find a seat in press conferences.
Yeah. Like, you've put in the work. And I think for the listeners, if you're like, who do I listen to for good Indiana content? Guys, Sammy is your man. Like,
just for football.
For football. But like, seriously though, if you're like, who's my go-to with strictly Indiana football? It's Hoosier Huddle. You guys have been doing it for 11 years. And this is this is especially the time to jump on, but year in and year out. And it's neat to hear you guys get rewarded this way with this type of a year. And then with the contract extension, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's a second thing that you mentioned. I'm trying to remember. Oh gosh. You mentioned like Michigan being a sellout and that it's a raucous crowd. It wasn't 7 or 8 weeks ago. I had DK from the Boiler Express on my podcast and Eric from the OHIO podcast. They were talking about how bad it is in Memorial Stadium. And that, most pictures are, of Ohio State fans filling Indiana. That ain't happening anymore.
It's not. And you had, it started with Nebraska, was the first sellout. And then on social media, it's like, well, it's all Nebraska fans, kind of like Ohio State. But it wasn't. It was 90. Like, Nebraska travels well, and I respect the hell out of that fan base. And I expected a lot more Nebraska fans there. That place was 95% IU fans. Michigan was probably a little few more, probably 85% IU fans. I thought Michigan traveled better than I thought they would, especially in a down year, coming off of a couple playoffs where it's like, you know what, let's save a couple $100 and not go to Bloomington this year. And then, Washington was 99.9%. You had a few purple people in there, but yeah, they started handing out these tags. So now's the time to start traditions. You're successful, and IU really doesn't have a lot of traditions outside of Heps Rock and the walk and stuff like that. But they've started doing towels at these games, and it looks phenomenal on TV. And it looks phenomenal from the press box, and I'm sure it looks phenomenal from the field as well. And that could, just like the Pittsburgh Steelers have the terrible towels. Look, I grew up as a 90s Knicks fan. We always had the towels at the playoff games and stuff like that. It's cool. Make that your tradition now. At big games or all games, we're going to do towels, label them. Students will love it. They'll collect them all and all that stuff. So, yeah, the crowds have been phenomenal. Memorial Stadium, when it's packed, is super loud. It's kind of like, it's not Austin, but it's kind of built like that where all the noise has no place to go. So it is 53,000, but it is built to be pretty loud.
Yeah. So, and it might not just be a one-off this season with Cignetti. We'll talk about that. What would you say your favorite moments have been covering this team so far in this season?
Does Cignetti at the basketball game count?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's by far. Oh man, that you know what? That might be. It might all be Signetti stuff. You know, him going on, coming out on the court saying Purdue sucks, but so does Ohio State and Michigan. Going on the Pat McAfee show or going Big Ten Media Day saying, "Hey, whatever, we're going to the Rose Bowl. It's an old stadium. We're just going out there to kick somebody's ass." And he did. And then going on the Pat McAfee show, explaining the whole trip logistics, he said, look, we're going to go out there, eat dinner, sleep, eat breakfast, kick their butt, and fly back. And he's the hey, I win, Google me. I mean, he's phenomenal. And he's phenomenal on TV. And he does have a shtick. And it has become more comical now than like his Yinzer jerk Pittsburgh guy. But man, he is yucking it up with everybody right now. It's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's like that type of confidence, like you can't
it doesn't
have it.
Happen.
Yeah. You can't
it doesn't
have it
happen
if you don't do anything with it.
It was, I told people on the FIU game, and that's Signetti's got to win. You got to win. And this FIU was a must-win game. Now, look, it's FIU. They were going to win anyway. But that was like, you got to win this game. You've talked all offseason about how you win. Google me. We were picked last at JMU, and we won the conference. I'm just stating facts, not, trying to predict anything. So, he puts a tremendous amount of pressure on himself. And, yeah, you got to back it up, and he has. But that's the attitude IU football has never had, was, hey, we're the new bully on the block, or we're standing up for ourselves. And you know what? As a school teacher, you know what the best way is to defeat a bully? Punch him in the mouth.
Mm-hmm.
That's and it's done. So that's what you did. And you put the Big Ten on notice.
And by the way, so many educators just kind of winced a little bit when they're like, don't tell my kid to punch someone in the back. But you're right. Like, how do you?
But you know what? They would agree with me off air. How do you take down a bully? It doesn't have to physically be a punch in the mouth. You could verbally punch them in the mouth too, and stand. Hey, this is my turf, and that's what Indiana's doing. They're three Power Four teams in Indiana with Notre Dame and Purdue in there as well. And so you're going to have to defend your turf. Yeah. And now Indiana's the hot ticket. People want to – it's unbelievable. I tried to sell my ticket for IU basketball yesterday for South Carolina. Couldn't sell it. Indiana football tickets are going for $250 to sit like behind the press box. Gosh. It's unbelievable.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, and it's interesting too, because I think we've seen a lot of coaching hires over the past couple of years with big names, right? Matt Rule at Nebraska and Luke Fickell at Wisconsin. And like a lot of them, Ryan Walters just down the road from you guys at Purdue. And a lot of them, they're stressing we need time. And I think there's a specific strategy that Signetti had. And I want to respect that Signetti had kind of a ready-made way to bring his guys in, but still.
So did Rule, and I mean, I granted, one, you can't get guys from the NFL into college, and two, I don't know if you want the guys in the Carolina Panthers anyway.
That's fair, but the point is, like, I think everybody kind of comes in and says it's going to be a 2 to 3 year process, and Signetti's like, no, we're just going to do it now, and I feel like that has been both refreshing, and it explains why I think they don't look at, like, he's never looked at Indiana as a subpar job that he's got to elevate. He's like, this is the best job that I can, that I have. And I'm going to make us the bully of the Big Ten, which honestly freaks me out about this Saturday as a Buckeye fan, because I'm like, they're not going to play scared. That's not Signetti.
It's not. And, to go back to your point on, Matt Rule and Nebraska, like, The NIL and the transfer portal have changed everything. Now, look, Kirk Cignetti, he's a great coach, and I think having the continuity in his coaching staff, too, coming from JMU, is a really underappreciated um, part of that. You bring in 13 guys from JMU who know the culture, who knows how he does business and stuff like that, and you have the coaching staff, most of the coaching staff, who knows this is what we do and this is the culture. The learning curve really goes quickly. So, and he said all fall. I knew in the winter that's when we started clicking, and he knew he had something. He didn't know what he had, but he knew he had something. Yeah. So, and his tactic was in the portal, it was production over potential. He didn't go after these 4 or 5-star guys who sat on the bench. He went after Elijah Surratt, who was an All-American at the D2 level or whatever St. Francis is, and was a Sun Belt with JMU. Mm-hmm. You had a couple running backs who played, from Wake Forest and UNC, and then you bring in Miles Price, who's been phenomenal. From Texas Tech, he was an all-conference returner. Curtis Rourke, he was MAC Player of the Year in 2022, and a lot of that hinged on that. Could he get back to that level? And he has, if not surpassed it.
He's phenomenal. Like, I don't know why he's not in the Heisman conversation.
Because it's Indiana.
Well, he beats Ohio State. That changes. That changes significantly if he has a big game against them. So
yes,
yeah. Well, I want to get to personnel in a minute, but you're talking about Cignetti a lot. How, there's a number of angles that we could look at this: the continuity, NIL, transfer portal, but how has Cignetti gotten the most out of the squad? How has he gotten them to gel?
It's the sum is greater than its parts is kind of it. But you have, you look at the offensive line. The last few years, Indiana's had a terrible offensive line, and nobody has quit talking about how bad the offensive line was. Well, Tom Allen brought in Bob Bostad last year. He's the only assistant coach that Kirk Cignetti retained. That offensive line is now up for the Joe Moore Award. And they've meshed. I think his just efficiency in running the program. You come in, you get your work done, you get out of there. I don't care where you work or what line of work you're in. If that's the attitude that your boss has, you're going to have workers who gel. Mm. I mean, if you told me, hey, you come in, you put in 6 hours of hard work in school, and you get to go home at the end of the day. You don't have to do extra duty because somebody didn't show up or whatever. You're going to have a happier team, and they're going to gel faster. And they're going to say, hey, we're going to work hard to get out of practice in 90 minutes and not be there for 2.5 hours. I remember Jerry DiNardo had a practice at IU. It was like a 3-hour practice, wasn't good enough, so he started it over again. It's like – yeah, those days are gone. But I think it's the efficiency he does that. He's also just a football nerd. I mean, he lives, breathes, eats whatever football, tape all the time, and he's just a football maniac. Yeah. And I think that really helps. And then you have a group of guys who have been doubted. All these G5 transfers, I dubbed them the G5 All-Stars earlier in the season, and then it's kind of true. Yep. But they've come in, they all want to prove that they belong. Yep. So, yeah, you have the right recipe with the right cook, you're producing something phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, aside from Michigan, they've won every game by 2 scores. It's been, they get a bye week at the right time.
Perfect time.
Yeah, before Ohio State. We'll talk about that game soon enough, but you talked about Rourke, you talked about Surratt, you've talked about Miles Price. There's a lot of guys on this team that are starting to become more nationally known. Rourke and Surratt, I think, probably, and I think Kamara on the defensive side in particular. But there are so many other key guys on this squad. Like, who all has leveled up to make this team a Big Ten contender and a playoff threat?
You look at the offensive line with Mike Kadick. He's become an all Big Ten caliber center. You look at C.J. West on the defensive line, a defensive tackle. People talk about Kamara's production, and he's been fantastic. But C.J. West is in there eating up blocks, knocking down passes, making plays. Aiden Fish, Jalen Walker at linebacker. You have D'Angelo Pons, who was a freshman All-American at JMU, who's now a shutdown corner at IU. And then I think the most underrated guy is Zach Horton. He's do everything. Tight end on offense, doesn't get a ton of catches, but he's the guy who's going to chip your defensive end, who's going to put one of your best defenders on their butt in a block. And he doesn't care if he gets rewarded with the catch. He'll catch some balls. He has a couple touchdowns on the year and stuff like that, but he's just your old school, kind of like a fullback, but at tight end. And he's really good. Then Omar Cooper Jr. at wide receiver has really blossomed. He started to come on late last year. He got hurt, but this year he's shown that he belongs at the Big Ten level.
Yeah. You mentioned Kadick at center. Do you think he's a guy that could win the Remington Award this year?
Again, it's Indiana. We'll see. They'll give it to somebody in the SEC. We don't have enough quality losses on our resume for them to notice.
Oh, man.
We'll get it to that.
Yeah, we will. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Well, no, let's do it now. Well, there are quite a few haters. I was on vacation and I couldn't get away from it. I was on a cruise, and I did not have internet access for most of it. So I was like, I'm kind of in bliss. And I just happened to turn on ESPN. And at that moment, Feinbaum is going off. And so is Mike Greenberg about how
does Mike Greenberg know about football? He thought the Jets were going to be good this year. Well, they stink.
Yeah. I have so many other thoughts about Greeny, but that's besides the point. But Feinbaum is, how could you put Georgia at 12 when you have Indiana at 5? And it's like all this stuff. Like, what do you say to the haters right now, particularly those?
If you want to watch a postseason where your best teams lose, go watch college basketball. It's what it is. If you want the best teams in the best teams, and you see some people with some most deserving rankings and all that stuff, and the debate between most deserving and best. If you want the most talented teams in there, just take the recruiting rankings and make a 12-team playoff and be gone with it. The regular season has to mean something. Losses have to mean something. People forgot to look it up, but I'm pretty sure Athlon or whatever, Lindy's, they picked Indiana at 15 or 17 in the Big Ten. Well, their schedule is too tough this year. They're not going to get many wins. So what is it? You can only play who you schedule. And yeah, Indiana dropped Louisville to get to Western Illinois. But you know what? The SEC doesn't realize? They play 8 conference games and the Big Ten plays 9. Mm-hmm. So they get to – Alabama's playing 9-1 Mercer. So enjoy your 9-1 Mercer. We'll play, look, you could say we play Ohio State instead of Mercer, or we'll play Michigan instead of Mercer. Or stuff like that. So yeah, the schedule. I'm done with strength of schedule. I'm done with it. Don't lose to Vanderbilt, and you got your butt kicked by Vanderbilt. You got your butt kicked by Vanderbilt, who lost to Georgia State.
Yep.
Georgia
State has more wins, SEC wins, than Sun Belt wins.
Yeah.
which is their conference.
I'm so tired of the SEC bias, and I wish somebody in the Big Ten would come out and say it besides Joel Klatt, because the SEC politics and has the best PR in the world to make their conference look like they're the NFL light and things like that. You know, I don't even know the losses. Arkansas beat somebody. Now I'm waiting for 4-loss LSU to be a sleeper for the playoff because they lost to an up and coming Florida team. I'm just so done with quality losses. You know what? If IU loses this week, it's a quality loss. They should still be in the playoffs. So I don't want to hear it from these SEC people who think they invented the game when it didn't. It was invented in the Northeast. It is a northern sport. Get over it.
Well said. Well said. And for years I've said like strength of schedule should matter and winning should matter. Like it's not either or, it's both.
Yeah, but you looked at IU's schedule in the offseason, you go, okay, you got both national title game participants at home. And yeah, they're going through some stuff. Oh, no, you have to play back-to-back games, Michigan and Ohio State. You have to go up to Michigan State, who is going to be a relegation with Aiden Childs and Jonathan Smith. You had 5-star awesome freshman Dylan Raiola coming in with Nebraska, who's going to kick your butt. You had to travel out to UCLA. Deshaun Foster was going to kick Kurt Cinetti's butt. Who else? Whatever. Mike Loxley and Billy Edwards are going to come in with the best offense in the Big Ten at the time. I mean, it's every week it's been IU is finally going to get tested. Then when they pass the test, like when they beat Nebraska 56-7, and basically made them quit on the season because they have not won a game since, and that's killing me. It's been, well, that team stinks.
Yeah.
That can't be the argument.
No. Well, and I think especially when the thing that drives me nuts is like Nebraska's 5-5. But they beat the tar out of Colorado.
They did.
Right? Like it wasn't close. Like it wasn't as close as the 18-point margin was. And yet Colorado's knocking on the door of being the Big 12 champion. Right? Yep. USC, I know Indiana didn't play USC. But USC
beat the hell out of LSU.
They beat LSU, and you can't ignore that. Arkansas lost to the worst team in the Big 12. Like they lost again, Vanderbilt lost to Georgia State, who is like, they don't have a win in conference, but they beat an SEC team that beat Alabama and that was within 3 points of Texas. And I think it's the thing that drives me nuts, especially this year, is like, there's so much parity in the sport. Like I would gather that the Georgia at their best could probably beat anybody. I don't care. Exactly. You lost. You had a chance. Now I think they'll probably get in because they beat Tennessee, but don't penalize, if Indiana loses to Ohio State, which I don't think I'm terrified of Indiana, by the way. But if they lose, like they should not be penalized beyond, those other 2-loss SEC teams. And it drives me up a wall that we're having this conversation when all Indiana has done is beat everybody by at least 2 scores, often more. And they've done it with adverse, they beat Washington without their starting quarterback. They beat Nebraska by 49 freaking points. I mean, come on. What are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. It's come to the point where at what point do losses matter? And you could throw Notre Dame in here too, because they arguably have the worst loss of any playoff contender with Northern Illinois. And look, I get it; they're an in-state team, and I really don't like Notre Dame. But at some point, losses have to matter. Don't lose to NIU. This is like the third group of 5 team, second group of 5 team that Marcus Freeman has lost to, and I don't care about 2023. People keep bringing that up. Well, they were 3-9 last year. They haven't. It doesn't matter. It's not playoffs based on the last 50 years. It's playoff based on this year. And so I think this is why I don't like the playoff. And while it's exciting that IU's in it, how legit is it if you can't get the an 11-0 or what are they, 10-0, 10-0 Big Ten team to actually be seriously considered?
Yeah. Well, and I think thankfully the playoff committee has said, at least so far with the way that they've ranked Indiana, is they are to be considered.
Well, I mean, we'll see. I have that dreaded feeling that they're just waiting for IU to lose to Ohio State. And I think if that is the case, it's going to come down to margin of victory. Because let's say Ohio State wins by 3 touchdowns, and everybody's like, wow, that's the same old IU who's gotten their butt kicked against Ohio State for the last 100 years. Okay. Whatever.
Yeah. It's frustrating. It's the reality of
they're going to use it.
season.
It's going to use an excuse to expand it even further, and then you're going to have they're wrecking the best regular season in sports.
Yeah. Let's regardless of what happens with the playoff, Indiana is positioning themselves well to be more in the top of this conversation now with the contract extension to Cignetti. If I remember correctly, it's 8 years, $72 million, I believe.
Yeah, it's $8 million a year with the annual $1 million retention bonus, or I don't know, whatever they call it. So it's essentially $9 million a year should he stay at Indiana for the next 8 years, which one would think is that's when he's going to retire. He's 63, going on 64 next year, so that he'll be in his 70s, and you'd think that would be it. But I mean, he's late. I think the biggest part of that contract is the increased salary pool for assistants, and then the guarantee that IU is going to upgrade their facilities. IU desperately needs a new press box. I swear to God, one of my writers almost blew it up on accident by plugging his computer into the wall outlet a couple years ago. It exploded and puffed smoke up, and he texts me. He goes, "Uh-oh, what do I do?" I said, "I don't know."
Oh no!
And so they desperately, that press box been there since the '60s. You need to get more suites in there to do up revenue. The NIL is working well, and they'll continue to do that. I don't think Kirk Cignetti signs that extension or new contract unless those things were in place, because he does not mess around, and he's not going to let Indiana mess around with that, because we've seen Indiana be good in spurts. Yep. You could go back to the 60s. You could go to the 80s and 90s with Bill Mallory, but they never really took advantage of it. They never put money into facilities. Even with Tom Allen, you never saw it. You never saw them take advantage of that success.
Yeah, and I think that's helpful. It's like it feels like what you're saying is like the mood with this extension. One, it's securing the coach, but what it really seems to signal is we're finally committing to being a top level Big Ten football team.
Yes, and that's exactly right. And people are calling them geniuses. You know what? I'm not gonna. It might sound like a hard ass. I'm not patting you on the back for something that you should have done 20 years ago. Great. It was a great move, great hire with Cignetti. This is the no-brainer move to do an extension. Now it's a no-brainer to invest in it. I've been telling people, even before I founded the site, you need to invest in football. That is the future of your athletic department and all that stuff. And they're finally doing it. And it's like, to me, everybody else is celebrating. To me, it's about damn time.
Yep. Yeah. Well, and I appreciate what you're saying. It's like you've been ignoring the investment for so long, the investment opportunity for so long. Now it's almost like, Tesla in the markets the past couple of weeks. It's like oh wow, it pops because of the election, and you're like, maybe you should have been investing that. That's not to get into the political weeds by any means, but it's like you should have been investing the whole time.
Yep.
But you hit it big, so like now let's make sure that we keep doing it regularly,
Yep.
steadily. So
Yep.
that's good. Well, I'll get you out on this big game in Columbus, obviously. 2 versus 5. I'm assuming that's going to be the ranking going into in every metric, every AP, coaches, CFP.
Yeah, it's got to be. They came in 5th in the AP, and I don't see Ohio State jumping Oregon.
Yeah.
Or falling.
Yeah. So 2 versus 5 in Columbus, where Ohio State has not been a dominant home team. Ryan Day has struggled against top 5 teams, although he's 1-1 this season. What's maybe the first question is like, what's the vibe around the program with this game looming? And then what are the keys to an Indiana victory?
Oh man. Coming off a bye week where, the vibe is we got a shot. And more than like a puncher's chance, we got to, we're going in. They're going in there with some confidence. I always look back to 20. You kind of look at your windows of opportunity against Ohio State, and IU's had them recently in the past under Kevin Wilson. You saw him 20. Jim Tressel gets fired. Ohio State kind of takes a step back in 2011. Kevin Wilson takes a 1-11 IU team in there, and I think they lose 38-20 or something like that.
Yeah, but that was close.
But it looks like IU is starting to figure out Ohio State. Then comes that crazy 2012 game when in Urban's first year, where it's 52-49 Ohio State, and IU recovered like 4 onside kicks. It was ridiculous. 2013 is the snow game in Columbus. Ohio State handles them. And then 2014, I don't even remember 2014. I think Sudfeld gets hurt. Yeah. And so you kind of throw that year away. But 2015 was always the year you circled. Sudfeld was going to be a senior. You're coming off. 2014 was the Tevin Coleman year where, if they had any other offensive weapons, they might have won. 2015, Ohio State's coming off the national title. You have quarterback controversy. You don't really know who you're starting. IU's off to a 4-0 start, but I called it like 2 years ago, 2 years before that. If IU's going to get Ohio State, it's going to be 2015 because all the stars align. And if Sudfeld and Jordan Howard don't get hurt, IU's probably winning that game because they're going into the end zone with Xander Diamont to tie the score in the last 10 seconds of the game, and Eli Apple doesn't get called for pass interference. But so going into this game, it's kind of like that. It's okay. This is not a real. They're good, very good Ohio State team, but they're not dominant on the lines like they have been in the past, and that's where I think I don't want to say Indiana has the advantage, because they probably don't, but that's where Indiana can wear them down. A little. They're just relentless on the lines. We saw it against Michigan. Indiana's defensive line dominated that offensive line. Now Michigan's defensive line did make some plays, especially later in the game, and IU losing Drew Evans, who's their starting guard before that game for the season, hurts. But yeah, that's you look at it and you go, okay, Curtis Rourke and Will Howard. It's probably a draw, maybe an edge to Rourke. Jeremiah Smith is elite, and the receivers at Ohio State are elite athletes, but IU also has some very good receivers. Ohio State's running backs probably have the advantage there, but you look at the defense and they're very similar. I mean, it's very similar, and there are probably people out there who give the coaching edge, and even some Ohio State fans who give the coaching edge to Kirk Cignetti and Brian Haynes and Mike Shanahan over Ryan Day and that staff. It's Indiana doesn't make any mistakes. So I watched the Northwestern game. I thought Northwestern had the right recipe.
Yep.
And it in the first quarter they played really well. What killed them was that fumble on the first drive. You kind of ground it down, you shorten the game, and then all of a sudden the game. And we've seen this a number of times with IU and Ohio State. One or two plays really turn a game that's pretty close into a blowout. For this game, it was Northwestern fumbled to take points off the board. Ohio State comes back and ties the game at 7, and then all of a sudden it's 14-7. I think the bad snap on third down happens, which takes Northwestern out of a third and short and forces them to punt. Punt snap goes over the guy's head, and all of a sudden it's 21-7. Ohio State's getting the ball at halftime again, and then it's 28-7 games over. Yeah. I mean, it happens so quickly, and that's what Indiana has to avoid. You have to avoid those critical mistakes. They've done it all year for the most part, and they've just played cleaner football than their opponents.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's something – the thing that strikes me about Rourke in particular, I haven't gotten to watch a ton of full games of Indiana. The one that I did, it was the UCLA game.
It's phenomenal.
And I remember the thing that stood out to me in that game, not everything was perfect for him in terms of like this. He got snaps late and, he almost got picked off at one point, and he just was not phased at all.
No,
and I'm like,
and that's
that to me, I think he is I think from a player standpoint, he has impressed me so much. He almost seems like Signetti's son, almost like the way that he plays, because he's confident, cocky, but he backs it up and he gives everyone else around him confidence.
Yeah, and you go back to the Maryland game where he threw 2 picks and fumbled the ball, but he's out there playing the next play. You saw it against Michigan. He came out halftime, first pass, throws an interception. But this team plays so well complementary football. Against Maryland, they turn the ball over. Maryland does not get a first down. Maryland has -9 yards and 0 points off of turnovers. That's unbelievable.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting. Go to your happy place for a happy price with Priceline's Black Friday sale. Save now and travel later with our best deals of the year.
Go to your happy price, Priceline.
Subtle results, still you, but with fewer lines. Botox Cosmetic, out of botulinum toxin A, is a prescription medicine used to temporarily make moderate to severe frown lines, crow's feet, and forehead lines look better in adults.
Effects of Botox Cosmetic may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness may be a sign of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Don't receive Botox Cosmetic if you have a skin infection. Side effects may include allergic reactions, injection site pain, headache, eyebrow and eyelid drooping, and eyelid swelling. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Tell your doctor about medical history, muscle or nerve conditions including ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects. For full safety information, visit BotoxCosmetic.com or call 877-351-0300.
See for yourself at BotoxCosmetic.com.
And that was an offense that was supposed to throw 50 points up. So it's this team has gelled so much that, when the offense kind of sputters, like last week, the defense picks them up. When the defense and offense kind of sputter, special teams will pick them up, just like Keyshawn Williams did in the punt return against Michigan. And then, sometimes against Maryland, the defense let up 28 points, but the offense scored 42 or 45, whatever it was. So you go up to Michigan State and you fell behind for the first time on November, whatever it was, 2nd. Offense comes back and puts 47 points on the board. Defense forces turnovers. Special teams get a block punt. This team just does everything. And I'll quote a high school coach, and I don't like giving him credit because he was a dick. But he said, we're ordinary people doing ordinary things extraordinarily well. That's exactly what IU is doing. They're ordinary players. They're not superstars. They weren't highly recruited. They were G5 guys and maybe some leftovers from a team that won 9 games in 3 years. And they're not doing anything super special. They're not running a triple option or, doing flea flickers or just blowing by guys with 4.1 speed. They're doing ordinary football things, but they do it extraordinarily well.
Yep. Yeah. That's a good thought. As you look at this game, what's your score prediction for Saturday?
You're going to talk me into taking IU. No,
I'm tempted to take them too, but I have a couple days to make my pick. So,
yeah, I think it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a great setting, but I do think Ohio State at home, with a lot to prove, they could get back into that Big Ten title chase with a win. I'm going to take Ohio State 31, Indiana 27, but okay. I could also see that being reversed too.
Yeah.
And I think that loss would keep Indiana in the playoff.
Oh yeah. I think if Indiana keeps it within 10, I think it's a lock.
So as long as they cover.
Yeah. But I know, as I've thought about this game, like I'm not going to make a pick yet, but I will not go beyond a 10-point margin because I have too much respect. I have too much respect for what Indiana's done. And I think what has been, I mentioned this on the Big Ten Huddle a while back. Indiana in some ways reminds me of Oregon Light. Like they're like Oregon Light almost in the way they operate. Like they have a really good offense. They're very, very clean offensively. They scheme guys open well. And like we saw what Oregon did to Ohio State, and that game could have been worse. I love it. Elijah Surratt's one of my favorite players.
Waffle House, baby.
Yeah.
There's no Waffle House in Bloomington, though.
I love that. I think he had that nickname. I think they said he's never eaten there. Is that true?
Well, he gave himself that nickname. So clearly he's been to a Waffle House. There's just no Waffle House in Bloomington.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
But I cannot see this game getting out of hand. And
no,
I think
Kirk Cignetti's 10-2 coming off a bye week in his career as a head coach. And the last time he had 2 weeks to prepare for a Big Ten opponent, he dropped 56 points on him and beat him by 49. I'm not saying that's going to happen at the Shoe, but I do think this is, just as you're a Buckeye guy and you're nervous, this is probably the most confident IU has been coming into this match. Either way, this might sound like loser attitude. It's been an awesome season. It's 10-0. What am I going to get mad about? Now, come Saturday, if it's 14-0 Ohio State, yeah, I'm going to be mad. But yeah, this is what big time football looks like. This is what you sign up for when you hire a guy like Kirk Cignetti and you want to play in the Big Ten. You got game day, big noon kickoff. I know Ohio State fans are all crying about big noon kickoff. Whatever, man. You cash that check, so you can't return that money.
I secretly love Big Ten, but big noon kickoff. But that's because I'm a dad of 3 kids, and like I can't stay up past.
I get home at 6:00.
Yeah, yeah. I don't really care. I'm like I get it, but also, yeah, I like noon kicks better, but. I know we're the minority though. So,
yeah.
well, Sammy, it's been a joy to have you on. Remind everyone where they can find you, your podcast, socials, your website, all that stuff.
Yeah, so our website is HoosierHuddle.com. We are all over social media, including Blue Sky now. So get used to it. So on X, where you are at Hoosier_Huddle. We're on Facebook as well. And then on Blue Sky, we are, what are we? We're like Hoosier-Huddle, something like that. Yeah, Hoosier Huddle. We don't even need the underscore. We were so new on Blue Sky. It's just at Hoosier Huddle on Blue Sky. And then you can find our podcast on anywhere you subscribe to podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon. Leave a review on Amazon, please. There's only been one review. It's been pretty good. So keep reviewing, keep liking, and then come back. We'll have all this stuff previewing Ohio State. We have a Q&A with Alex Gleitman. I think he's of the Buckeye Huddle now, but he seems to switch sites so often. We'll have a Q&A with him. We'll have our podcast with TJ breaking down the game as well. And then just matchups to watch, all that stuff.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Well, Sammy, thanks again for joining us. For the rest of you guys, make sure follow Sammy over at Hoosier Huddle. Make sure to like, subscribe here, and spread the word. Take care. God bless everybody.
All right. Thanks, Zach.